grandson, to Dr. Dolvin, if he'd come, and Steve would like to say a few words.
Thanks for coming. As Pastor there said, I am Steve Dolvin, grandson. My father is Dan Dolvin. Many of you know that, or at least I made the connection because I can't count how many times I was called Danny over the last couple days. And that is taking it to the next generation, because now my kids are being called me, and we actually had a little game going on, if you might not know it, during the calling hours. I told them if they got to 25 times where people said they looked like me, that I would get them a prize. So they are very close. So I don't claim to be good, but I am accustomed to speaking in front of people. So I'm a professor out at Butler University in Indianapolis. I oversee the adult Sunday school program at our church. I've even had the chance to speak to a couple hundred Marines at one point, which is very interesting. It's very intimidating, but this is by far the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I'm not an emotional guy, for those of you who know me, so please forgive me. It's been nice to see old friends and faces, and to hear all the nice things that and the stories. People have said my grandpa married them, or he taught me in class, and so it's interesting. We've done the same thing in our families. So my cousins and I have, reminisced about the clock game, which was basically Sunday afternoon after dinner. He would take you into his room, and you'd lay down in the bed and you'd watch the clock, and the last one to see whoever saw the last number won. So he always come up with those types of games. My kids don't fall for those as easy as I did. So I've heard a lot of people say they remember how good he was at mooing like a cow. So for those of you who've known him very well, he would do that quite a bit, and it was just, I'm not sure how he learned that. I suppose it's growing up on a farm, and he had many stories, and none of which I could actually verify, but they sounded true. So he always told me that there was actually an even number of seeds in every watermelon.
That's right.
And that's something, and who knows that? But anyway, so it was just, many stories. And so what I thought I'd do today, just with the short time, is tell you two things about my grandfather. And in, memory of the fact that he was the Sunday school superintendent in VBS, I thought I'd do a little object lesson today. And there were two things that I wanted after my grandfather passed away, and so I brought those today. It wasn't a fancy watch, it wasn't a gold coin, and I thought of two verses in Proverbs. Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children." That's me. I didn't get money, I didn't get fame, but he left an inheritance. It says a good name in Proverbs 22:1. It says, "A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold." So the first thing I brought, not something you probably normally see at a funeral. So how many of you know what this is? Okay, so for those of you who've been around, I went to the Christian school, played a lot of sports there, and my grandpa was at every game of mine, even more than that. And he wore this to every game. And Pastor Thayer told me ahead of time he's heard some stories and he didn't believe them because of how refined my grandpa was. The phrase I remember the most is, "Ref, you better get him a saddle because he's riding him like a horse." He was the only one that was actually allowed to yell at the refs because he did it with such a sweet spirit. He was just having fun, and he liked it. And it reminded me of Matthew 5, so the Sermon on the Mount, Beatitudes. And as you go down through that list, Let me read a few of those, and I don't think anyone could disagree that this is an apt description of my grandfather. Blessed are the poor in spirit. He was the most humble man I knew. Blessed are they that mourn. I don't know how many, do we have a record of how many funerals he did? Weddings, funerals, babies, hospitals, he was the man. Blessed are the meek, strength under control. Blessed are they that hunger and thirst after righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. I could not think of a better description. And the promise that's given in Matthew 5 is, for great is your reward in heaven. Now the challenge for us is, if you go down in that passage to verse 16, it says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works, and we recognize those today, and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Now the second thing, you might think, well, he was a pastor, so he probably wanted his Bible, and that's true. So I have one here. This was one that was given to him by the church, and a handwritten note from Pastor Cummins says, remembering without ceasing your work of faith and labor of love. And I did want that, but the most important thing to me was a prayer list. So I go through this. There's a church bulletin, there's the missionary letters, and you probably can't see it, but there are pages and pages of yellowed sheets. Notes from Pastor Cummins asking him to pray for specific things. Tear-stained. I could not think of a better thing to remember my grandfather by. This was his faith in action. Now, as Pastor Thayer mentioned, in his later days, his favorite verse was Psalm 71:18. It says, now when I am old and gray-headed, and it goes through, and I mean, his verse could have been, now when I'm young and gray-headed. I mean, he went gray when he was, I don't know, I don't remember any other color when we went through the pictures. I mean, many of them were black and white, but even the color ones, I can't remember a time where he didn't have gray hair, but before that, so as far back as I can remember, his favorite verse was Jeremiah 33:3. Call unto me and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. Now, for those of you who've been at the church, you know he did not have a golden tongue. I mean, he couldn't stand up here and just preach, you know. He preached and he was good, but he didn't. You just understand what I'm saying. He wasn't necessarily have a golden tongue. He didn't necessarily have a deep theological mind, but he had something much more powerful. If you're here, I can guarantee you that he prayed for you by name at some point in your life. And that's the one thing I'm going to miss the most, is knowing that he prayed for me every day. So in closing, I would just say, if you're here and you're not saved, my grandpa's been praying for you, and I can't think of a better way to remember him than to give your life to Christ today. If you're not living for the Lord, I know he's been praying for you to come back. Whether it's in the family, whether it's in the church family. People know that you're related to him by blood, by the Savior. Don't disparage his legacy. And my final question is, who's going to pray for me every day? Who's going to pray for this church? Who's going to pray for the pastor? And Ezekiel talks about, they search for a man who would stand in the hedge and make up the gap. There's a big gap that's been left. We all need to step up.